Welcome to the Puzzle People Pod. I'm here today with my co-host Emily, as well as Nathaniel, whose work you may know from some of his Ravensburger puzzles. Nathaniel started drawing as a child and then fostered a love for painting in college. He started designing board games and now puzzles. You may have met him or heard him speak at nationals, and our conversation today is on the art of puzzles. Welcome, Nathaniel.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. So before we dive into all things puzzles, I found an interview online and it talked about how, as a kid, you like to draw at your dining room table. So I'm curious if there are any characters or subjects that were favorites to draw.
Okay, well, everyone in my family would draw. So my father was a wood sculptor, and we always had pencils and paper around, so we all drew. And I liked to draw nature. One thing I enjoyed drawing a bunch when I was younger was I liked to draw cactus. I don't know, just the shapes of them were kind of fun. Kind of that Western style cactus. I love drawing animals. So I don't know, I grew up drawing and my family grew up drawing. It was just something that we all did.
Yeah, I get that. My dad actually had a puzzle. His were on with pomegranate, though, so slightly different. He mostly did folk art and was self-taught. So I'm curious. I saw that in college you really fell in love with painting. Was this something that you were going to school, getting sort of an art education, art degree, or you self-taught and that was something you were doing on the side and really developing your style on your own?
So I always wanted to do color, but I was always just working with pencil and I was very comfortable with pencil. And in college, I wasn't necessarily studying specifically art. My major was in graphic design, but before that, I was doing a lot of creative writing. So I wasn't really sure exactly what route I was going to go. And I just started taking some painting classes, and the details I could get with a pencil are so great. I went to this medium where I loved the color, but it was very challenging to get the details. And the medium didn't work the way I wanted it to. Either it would dry too fast or it wouldn't dry at all. And I remember I'd take these wet paintings on the bus back and forth between the school, and I'd be like holding them very gently, trying not to get paint all over everybody. Um, and I actually found that it was very therapeutic painting because I tried to create the details I wanted and it was frustrating. And so it kind of got me out of my shell and I started painting just larger and larger paintings and just using brush strokes, color, nothing in like particular, but I kind of ended up painting a whole canvas every class period. And so they started off being small, and then they started growing. And by the time I was done with my like 3 classes, they were bigger than me, and I did the whole canvas in like 3 hours. And it was just sort of a play with color, play with contrast, depth, just learning about like how it visually feels on the canvas. So I always loved the color, but it wasn't until years later that I ended up learning digital painting. And I learned that because I was designing my own board games and I got one of mine published with the publisher, and I spent a lot of money getting the artwork done. I actually hired an artist to do it. And the artist I hired inspired me to learn digital painting. And digital painting is such a great medium for me because it can have the look and feel of traditional painting, and I get to work with color, which I love, but I also get to work with that really easy, fine details of working like with a pencil, because I work with the Wacom tablet with a little stylus pen, and so it has very good detail, and I can zoom in and I can work on little details, and so it's kind of the best of both worlds.
I think for those who maybe don't speak artists, can you explain a little bit, like, what is a tablet? Like, how does that work? What is digital painting? Maybe just a very simple 101 for those who maybe have never opened Photoshop in their life or one of the other ones on the iPad, etc.
Yeah, I have explained it before to people, and then like a month later, I started talking about it more in detail, and they couldn't understand the first time I told them. They didn't understand what it really was. A lot of times people think of digital painting as like collage work, but I actually don't do that. I work on a computer, and my computer's plugged into a monitor, and the monitor is tilted at an angle, and the monitor is what we call a drawing tablet. And I actually use what looks like a pen with like a rubber tip, and I draw onto the screen of my monitor. And I actually draw every brush stroke. So it's just as if I was doing traditional work. I have to draw the outlines, and then I have to fill it with color, and then I have to go back through with brush strokes and build it up layer and layer and layer, just like I would do a traditional medium.
I have one more question about this, and then I'll let Ben maybe hop in. But I'm curious, time-wise, do you find that this is similar to traditional painting? Does it take more time, less time? I mean, my limited experience of creating digitally, I'm thinking very much in the Photoshop world where we have different layers and we're sort of building upon building upon building. For those who don't know, like you can select sort of different pens to give you different looks. So the strokes look different. It can look more like a color pencil or a paintbrush, or even like a sponge or spray paint. There's a ton of different things. So in your experience, do you feel like the process of doing things digitally takes more time, less time, about the same? How do you feel about that?
Okay, so it's a really good question. So for a smaller project, I would say digital is faster. If I'm doing something simple, I don't have any cleanup and I don't have any setup. I can just turn on a computer and just start working. So if I'm just trying to do something simple, a couple hours, I could get something done. If I'm doing something large, like these puzzles, there's so many layers, and just going through the layers takes so much time because I have to like turn off layers, turn on layers, go through and can't figure out which layer I'm illustrating on. And so even though sometimes I'm not necessarily like working with my brush, I'm having to navigate through the files and through the layers, which takes quite a bit of time. If you think about just every time you come to the canvas, you have to find which layer was I working on, which layer has that one object on that I want to edit. And so there's a lot of like navigating the program. So I would say it's probably very similar time-wise.
Sort of speaking to the process of making art for puzzles, but a different coin of it. How does it work working with like a puzzle manufacturer? Are you presenting them with a final image, or is like, how do you? What's sort of the inspiration, or I guess like the cue to start on a piece of art for a puzzle?
Okay. So it varies by publisher. It varies by project. A lot of publishers will just submit finished work to them, and then they will consider whether they're going to publish it or not. I work with Ravensburger, and they work much closer with me throughout the whole process. So sometimes it's an idea that they come to me and ask me to do, and then we work together from the beginning. And I'll do sketches and send them sketches, and then they'll come back to me and tell me what they liked, what they did, what they would like to be changed. And then through the whole process, these puzzles take me between 2 and 3, sometimes more months to complete. So I'm sending them I don't even know how many emails we go back and forth, but a lot. And in the end, I think I'm almost done, and then they want a lot of changes. And that's when it's the most frustrating for me, because I've already like been working on it for several months, and I'm used to it being a certain way in my vision, and then all of a sudden I have to go back through and change something. And I'm like, well, why didn't you ask me earlier? But they know exactly what is coming and what's going, and they're passing it around through the office, and they know exactly what the puzzlers are really excited about. So they might be like, oh, change this. And I can give you an example based off of my work.
To jump in really quick, because we are doing audio only for our podcast, if you can just describe or tell us the name of the puzzle, and what we'll do is we will put links in our Instagram, so people, when this episode airs, not only can they see the puzzle you're talking about in the example, they could also buy those puzzles if they so desire.
No, I appreciate that. So the Happy Sheep Yarn Shop is the second puzzle that I illustrated. And when I was illustrating it, like, I was pretty far into the piece, and then they were like, hey, take one of those sheeps and bring it out into the foreground. And they kind of pointed down at the right-hand corner. And I first didn't like the idea. I had my scene, I had my sheep all in a row. I really liked what I was creating, and it took me, like, I had to, like, take a pause, take a breath, and then try it. And once I started doing it, I was like, oh, they're right. They're right. It looks really good with it. It gives the puzzlers something new to do, to look at. It's filling empty space that would have just been grass. So that's one thing that's been really nice working with the publishers, is if I was just on my own doing this from the beginning, I probably would learn what puzzlers would like, but this way they have so much knowledge, and I'm learning much quicker how to create a puzzle, how to create something that they are interested in, and how to fill the gaps so that it's not too challenging or that no area becomes boring.
I'm curious, where do you start when it comes to one of the puzzles? Does Ravensburger go sheep, field, go, or hot air balloons, go, and then you're like, okay, or are you thinking, I think it'd be really cool to do this kind of image, and they ask and you pitch a few things? Like, what is that process like? You've said they've given a lot of feedback, but what does the beginning of that look like?
Like, half the puzzles are ideas like I brought to the table and wanted to do, and they were like, yeah, those sound good. And half of them are ideas that they said, hey, our team has done a lot of research, and we want to do a puzzle on mushrooms. We know that mushrooms are trending. We want to do a mushroom puzzle. And I created a mushroom puzzle, and I created it in my own style. I made every mushroom a different color, and I kind of created like a rainbow of mushrooms inside my image. And I also, well, yeah, so that's one thing that they do, is they ask me, and but the vision and the creation is always my own. And they told me, like, they wanted me to do a treehouse puzzle. So they said, hey, let's do a treehouse puzzle. And from that, they sent me a few references of things that they kind of liked. But after that, it was all on me to find out how I wanted to present it, what I wanted to create. And that's, we were doing a hot air balloon puzzle. They wanted me to do a hot air balloon puzzle. And I wanted to do something a little different. So I put it in floating islands, kind of like the balloons were coming up to this new world up in the sky. And so that was my take on the air balloon puzzle.
Do you have a hard time disconnecting the art, like making of art for puzzles, to your, the art you do for yourself? Like, do you ever start a process and you're like, you're doing it for your own enjoyment, and then it turns into, oh, this would be a really good puzzle, or maybe vice versa?
I was going to say, probably not. The puzzles, they take so much energy and time that I want to know that I'm developing it specifically for a puzzle. Sometimes I see images out there in the wild, online, or in this, just anywhere I go, stores, galleries. Sometimes I see something and it inspires me, and it gives me an idea. But I'm not necessarily drawing something and be like, oh, I want to make this into a puzzle. And I think part of that is because I've been working in the board game industry for a while, and a lot of the illustrations I illustrate are like a single card. And they're very basic and simple, like an object or a character, or like a scene, a small scene, but nothing that would inspire like necessarily like a whole puzzle. I think there are some people that do board game art for like covers, and sometimes the covers can feel a lot more like they could be for a puzzle.
So I think I want to talk about board games for sure, but I want to first hear, you mention, seeing art and being inspired. So I'm curious, What kinds of images do you think makes for a really good puzzle?
Well, I think it's not necessarily like what kind of image, it's how the image is presented. Like, there can be a beautiful image, but it's not necessarily going to make a great puzzle. And I'm learning that a puzzle, well, for me, the way I like to illustrate is I like to illustrate with lots of different color. I like to have different subjects in different areas. So I kind of break apart the image and say, this is a puzzling area. This is a puzzling area. And I think about it not as a whole image. I think of, there's like a whole story, but within the image, there's little sections that I think about. Someone might want to puzzle this, chair or this balloon or this castle. And I think about all the spacing. So it's more like just kind of focusing on the spacing, not necessarily like, oh, this is a great specifically picture.
Yeah, we've heard you're a bit of a board game geek. So do you have any favorite board games?
Well, I'd probably say my own. I So my friend recently designed a game, and it's been going really big lately. And I was really blessed to be a part of his game and play test it early on, and just watch his game develop. And his game's called Gnome Hollow, and it was like the biggest game of the year this year. And he had like 13 publishers give him offers for his game, and it was really exciting. I just love watching. I know a bunch of board game like illustrators. I know a bunch of board game designers. I know a bunch of publishers. I just like the whole field as a whole. I enjoy games that take about an hour or less. I enjoy games that are easy to teach. I enjoy like family games. Um, I still, enjoy like larger games that take more time, but I don't play them because I don't know. I just want to just have a good time, and I just want to play games with friends and everyday people, not necessarily specifically hardcore gamers.
Do you have any favorite games? Like recently, I don't know if you heard of Cultivate, but I played it with a few friends and it was really easy to pick up. And so that was like a really good party game for people who don't want to learn a lot of rules. But I'm curious what other games you're thinking are your go-tos when you have a game night or when people come over.
One of the games we've been playing a lot lately is Azul.
Oh, yeah.
Azul is a really great game. Um, uh, Architects, the Seven Wonders Architects is a new one for us that we started playing, and we're enjoying that one. Catan is one that we often bring to the table, but that one's a little bit longer. Ticket to Ride, Splendor. We usually like the lighter games, but we also like the card game Bang. Yeah, just games that take, if it's a card game, under 30 minutes, if it's a board game, under an hour.
Have you played Dominion?
I have not played it. Well, I played it a long time ago.
Okay. Because I've enjoyed Dominion, for those who don't know, it's a card game, but it's essentially a deck building game. And the replay value is really fun because you're able to pick different cards. There are good expansions, and it is fairly easy to pick up. It's a little bit harder than a game like Cultivate, but, still fairly easy.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Dominion is that every game's going to be different because you're taking different stacks of cards and then mixing them together. And depending on what game you play, you're having different cards come out. And so that is kind of cool.
Is there an art of storytelling in sort of the illustrations that you do? I know games are so heavily story based or strategy based that a lot of illustrations sort of have to stack or play into one another. Is that part of your process at all?
It's definitely part of the process, and it's becoming more and more so as I create puzzle artwork, especially with AI. I don't want to necessarily get into AI, but with AI can create an image. But what it has a harder time doing is telling a story and getting into like more elements of what a human might want to create and what they want to talk about and what they want to bring to the story. And so that's one thing we're focusing on is, well, what is the story behind the image? What elements can we add that are going to enhance that story? And so, yeah, that's definitely something. When I first started, so my first image was, or my first puzzle was magical potions. So I'm going to take a step back. So when I first started painting digital, I started illustrating potions kind of as a warm-up. And I really enjoyed it because there are fun shapes that I could draw very quickly. And I really loved all the different bright colors. And I liked focusing on how the light went through the water. So I drew a bunch of potions. And Ravensburger saw my potions. And that's when they asked me if I could illustrate a puzzle. And so I had a bunch of potions that I threw into the puzzle. And then I illustrated 6 more potions. So at the time, I was just trying to illustrate these potions. But as we started focusing on it becoming a puzzle, we wanted each small image within the puzzle to tell a story about what that potion did, what that potion does if you were to drink it. And so I would try to add little accents or little details that told a story about the potion. And for an example, there's one that is a poison potion. And the top part of the potion has a little skull on it. And there's some mushrooms in the background. And we're trying to create the story that this might be poison.
Looking at the potion puzzle that you just talked about and a few others, I've noticed that there are some of your puzzles where you kind of have things sectioned, like each potion has its own section and it's its own color. And then images like the one you were talking about with the sheep in the field or the hot air balloons is more of a scene where you still have individual colors and moments happening, but it's almost like a photograph. Do you have a preference in what you design or what you make? Do you prefer I'll call it photograph for lack of a better term, or the kind of individual little fun, detailed, with a theme?
So I started off doing the sections, so like 12 different sections. And that was because I had already had 6 potions illustrated, and they wanted to just put them in a collage and kind of do a bunch of different collage of potions. And I ended up creating the stone background to divide them. And then I ended up creating just a lot of more little details. I really wanted to prove to them with my first puzzle that I could do more than just illustrating a potion. So I added a lot more information and a lot more detail. Then my sheep puzzle was different. And then I went back to the grid format with different smaller sections within a puzzle. And I like both. I think that the ones that have little sections are really fun to puzzle because people can pick like, oh, I'm going to go for the green ones. I want the love potion, the red, But the other images in some way tell more of a story, the ones without the grid. And you kind of end up getting more sucked into like this whole world. And they're also a little bit more challenging to illustrate because with the grid, you kind of focused on like one little area, and then you have to balance it with color. But you're like, okay, now I'm going to do another little area. With the other images, like the files are much larger. My computer wants to crash because I'm like so many layers, and you're having to manage all of the space, and you have to be really clever with how you fill an entire illustration, like instead of just doing the sections. So in some ways, the sections are fun to puzzle and they're fun to illustrate. In other ways, I feel like you get more story sometimes if you do like a whole image and a world within that.
You just gave me an idea. We're going to put a poll up to see what the puzzlers prefer. Do they prefer sectioned images to puzzle, or do they like a big picture? So follow us on Instagram, Puzzle People Doc. We will have a poll. But yeah, no, I'm curious if you've gotten any feedback too, to that point, from the puzzlers you've met either at nationals or other events that you've done.
A lot of them have mentioned that they really enjoyed the puzzles that have sections, especially if you're speed puzzling, because it was really easy to focus on those colors and they all know where that they go in that one area. And I would like to illustrate some more puzzles like that in the future. When I first started, I wanted to do a whole series of little sections, but I branched out and I'm really enjoying the full images as well.
Yeah, do you have any goals and aspirations either for your puzzle illustrations or just your illustration career as a whole?
So as an illustration, like as a whole, I'm really happy illustrating puzzles. It brings me a lot of joy, and it brings me a lot of joy to connect with the community. I think in my ideal life, I just keep doing what I'm doing, just do it more. I really do enjoy it. Sorry, what was the other thing you asked?
If there are any goals or aspirations you have that relate to puzzles specifically.
Yeah, I think I just want to keep, I want to illustrate more fun, puzzles that are more fun. And I want to test myself to see what parts are not working. How do I make the next image more engaging, more fun? And so that's kind of my goal right now, is just by trying to improve the puzzling experience with each image.
You mentioned the community. I'm curious if there's been anything that surprised you about the puzzle community since you started making puzzles.
I'd say, well, a lot of things have surprised me. So I started in 2020, and I don't know, it's kind of a crazy story because I had a bunch of artwork from my game that I had created, and I owned the rights to the artwork, and it wasn't my work. And I was looking for manufacturers to make them into puzzles. And all the manufacturers said that they were a year out, that they were not taking on any new clients during COVID. And so I was really lucky or blessed that Ravensburger connected with me at that time in 2020, because even if I wanted to get a puzzle made, I couldn't. And so they found me and they loved my work, and we started working together. I think I'm losing track of where I was going.
Well, I was curious. I mean, actually, this brings me to another question, which was, if somebody's dream is to design puzzles, what advice do you have for them?
First of all, to an artist, someone that is early on, or someone that wants to be an artist or is an artist and is working at that, I say, the best advice I can give is just illustrate what you love illustrating, because eventually you'll get good at that. And don't worry about, you don't need to be good at everything. And that's one thing that I wouldn't necessarily say that I was giving myself a hard time, but I didn't draw a lot of characters or people. And I kind of thought, man, I should draw more characters. I should draw more people. And I found myself just gravitating towards drawing these potions. And I just kept drawing potions. I just really enjoyed just finding a new way to draw a potion. And it was actually my potions that led me into the board game world, in a sense, because people started asking, hey, would you illustrate some potions for my board games? So I started illustrating potions for board games. And then I got better at illustrating potions. And then Ravensburger saw these potions and they're like, hey, can you illustrate a potion puzzle? So I was just following my love and my passion of what I enjoyed illustrating. And, if you do that long enough, you will start getting good at everything else. But with every puzzle that I illustrate, there's always a challenging moment. There's always, I call it the ugly phase. And 80% of the time I spend on the puzzle, I feel like I'm in the ugly phase. It's not until the end and that everything comes together. And then I'm like, oh, wow, I illustrated this. It's beautiful. And there's moments that everything starts looking beautiful, and then you start illustrating other areas and they're really rough, and then the puzzle looks like it's a mess again, and you start fixing things and it starts looking better. So just everything takes time, and just enjoy the journey, and just illustrate what you love, because you will get good at that, and then people will notice it.
Film definitely has an ugly phase too. And Ben and I have been in that before. So you kind of just have to wade through it until you get to the other side. Just keep going.
It can be painful, especially if you're working on an image for months, and sometimes you get into it, and the longer you're in it, your mind doesn't know it from a outside perspective, and so you might just be like, oh, everything looks awful. I don't know how I'm going to bring this together. How am I going to pull it together? How am I going to finish it? But if you keep working at it, it doesn't matter how long it takes. It will find its way to being finished.
It's cool. Going back to Emily's original question, I think you're starting to answer. It was about like what you found surprising about the puzzle community. Um, and I'm curious, I guess, more specifically, what kind of support have you received from the community? Like, is it like a welcoming community? You know, as an artist, obviously you're putting your work out there and it can be pretty daunting to do that, right? Have you felt that at all?
Well, yeah, I appreciate you bringing that question back because that's really an important question. So honestly, I've felt like overwhelmed by all of the kindness that I have seen in the puzzling community, and that's why I brought up 2020. Is was illustrating a puzzle, and I started following all of these Facebook groups, and no one knew I was a puzzle illustrator. It wasn't going to be my puzzle wasn't going to come out for 9 months. But I started following, and I just watched all of these stories and watched all of the support that people gave to everyday puzzlers, whether they were having a hard day, whether they had COVID, just things that they were going through. You know, sometimes it was just that their cat destroyed their puzzle, but the community was just always so warm and so supportive. That part of it has been really amazing to witness. And then as I got into sharing my artwork, everyone has been very kind and very supportive. And it's amazing to know that there's a community out there that is interested in what I'm doing and excited to see what I do next. And to go further into this, the speed puzzling has been really enjoyable to go to these events and meet the people in person that I've started to get to know online. And Diarn from Australia, she actually invited myself and my wife to go and speed puzzle with them in our first competition in Canada. And so it was fun to, one, watch people build my puzzle and be a part of it in that way, and then go and be a part of the puzzling community and build a puzzle in one of these events, which was wonderful and stressful and exciting and very rewarding at the end.
How are you as a speed puzzler?
I'm slow. So my wife's faster than I am, and we have been trying to build our puzzles, and I think I'm slowly making the gap a little bit less. But when I went to the first U.S. National Speed Puzzling Competition, they had these 100 and 200 piece puzzles, and they had them out, and we were just timing ourselves and writing down our time. And I built this puzzle, and it took me, I don't remember how long it took me, like 50 minutes or something. And it was like a 200 piece puzzle or maybe a 100 piece puzzle. And I was like, oh man, that took me a long time. I'm going to build another one. I could do it faster. So I built one, and it was like 42 minutes. I was like, yay, I did really well. And I wrote down my time. And when I looked at everyone else's time, I was like 12 seconds slower than the slowest person. Of course, these were like, the national fastest. But it's inspired me to work at it. And when we went to Canada, my wife and I got a puzzle, and it was a little bit more of a challenging puzzle, and we didn't finish it in our time lot. And it was a little discouraging to work really hard and drive, 9 hours. And we're like, we didn't make it even to the time. We didn't finish the puzzle. But then when we did the group puzzle with Diarn and her husband, Alan, we finished with 1 minute to spare. And it was such a rewarding experience to work together and you just not give up. And, you feel your heart sink. And you're like, oh, there's 15 minutes left. We're never going to make it. But you just keep going. And it was really great. So it wasn't really, we weren't going to win. We weren't going to take first place, but it was kind of a challenge. We just wanted to make it in the time. And then just recently, we went to a local speed puzzling event at a local board game store. And there was only 3 teams. But the woman picked the hardest puzzle imaginable. And it was just grass. There was one bird, and it was just brown grass. And we started puzzling as fast as we could. And we're like, we're gonna like show these local people, And they didn't have a time limit. So we spent 4 hours and 13 minutes, and we finished the puzzle, and we came in first. So it was great, but it was exhausting.
That's really fun. I have to say, and we're fairly new, and part of why we wanted to do this podcast was we wanted to get a chance to talk to more people in the community, especially because when Ben and I go to these events, a lot of times we'll be filming, so it's really hard for us to just chat with people like we're doing with you today. And something that I have thought is just so cool and is reflected in your story. I love that this is just international, worldwide, like cross-cultural values, everything. It's been really fun to see. We've been somebody in Colombia reached out. They run like their national tournament, and it's just really fun to see the love of puzzles worldwide. And so my last question is, have you had any surprises where someone has shared either online your puzzle or reached out online to you that was just kind of like a fun, unexpected thing that you didn't expect?
Well, it's been so sometimes I know that my puzzle is going to be an event and I like go to it, and sometimes it just surprised me and someone posts about it. So, um, the national speed puzzling competition in New Zealand used my mushroom puzzle, and I didn't know about it, and they just posted about it, and it was really exciting to see that were using my puzzle on the other side of the world. And then Alfonso, from the president from the World Speed Puzzling Championship, he sent me a text on WhatsApp, and he showed me a picture of my mushroom puzzle being given away at the Portugal National Speed Puzzling event. So it's fun to just see how my puzzles are being used in different places in the world, and yeah, all of it's exciting.
Are there questions you get most often asked when you're at these like puzzling events, or something that you want to let our audience know about your craft or anything really?
Well, mostly people just want to know like what it's like working with the publisher. Um, Not too many people ask me too many art questions about like how I'm doing it or why I'm doing it. um, Most of the people are just really interested in what it's like to be a puzzle illustrator, or like what is it like to work with Ravensburger. Um, and it has been really a wonderful experience. And over the last several years, I've gotten to know all, I don't know if I know their entire team, but I know so many people that work with Ravensburger, and it takes so many people to bring these amazing puzzles to life and to get them out there. And it's just fun to meet with them all, find out that they're just people, sweet people, working in this industry. Um, and I feel blessed to illustrate and to be able to do this and to work specifically with Ravensburger has been really great. Because I know that when I create an image that is going to go all over the world, and that thousands of people are going to build it and enjoy it with their family. And so, kind of take a kind of tell another little story. When I was 18 years old, I had a dream that I wanted to create some kind of product. And at first it was a book. I wanted to write a book and get it into Barnes & Noble. And that was a dream of mine. And I went to school. I studied creative writing. And then years later, I started designing board games. I had some good success with my first board game. And I kept thinking, when is that product going to be in Barnes & Noble? Is it going to be my game? Is it going to be these playing cards? Eventually, it was one of my puzzles. It was my mushroom puzzle was the first one. And it was just amazing to kind of 18 years have a dream and then have it come true. And it was like, after it came true, I was like, well, why was that my dream? Why did I want that to happen? And like a week later, my sister posted or sent me a picture of her family going into Barnes & Noble and her her daughters, and holding up the puzzle and being really excited to see it in Barnes & Noble. And I was thinking about, it's just having the dream of having it in Barnes & Noble was just knowing that people were going to build it, people were going to enjoy what I'm doing. And that's why it's really great to work with Ravensburger, because I know that people are going to enjoy what I'm doing.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect note to end. So we are going to have all of your puzzles on our Instagram so people can see the art, potentially buy them if they want to make them. And I think it would be also really great to get some of your board games too, to share that with the puzzlers that follow us. So hopefully you can send me all of that after we hang up. But thank you so much for being here. Now, Nathanael was someone who came highly recommended. So if you have a recommendation of someone you would like to hear from on the Puzzle People Pod, feel free to reach out. We're at Puzzle People Doc on Instagram.
And if you enjoyed the episode, please share with your friends. And you can reach out to us at ben@chickenwingpictures.com.